Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Lewiston City Council regular meeting of Monday, March 14th, 2016. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join Councilor Blakey in reciting the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor. Our next item of business is citizen comments. It's an opportunity for citizens to address the council on agenda items or other items they wish to bring to the attention of the council. Citizens are encouraged to discuss operational issues in advance with the city manager. In consideration of others wishing to speak, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. I'll say before we go forward, we have 3 public hearings tonight. If we have anybody here that's planning on testifying for any one of the public hearings, please hold your comments until that time so we have them properly on the record. Do we have any citizen comments this evening? Okay, well, seeing none, we'll go ahead and start in on public hearings and presentations. Our first item up is our fiscal year 15 audit presentation, accepting the audit for fiscal year 15 as presented by President Gage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We have met several weeks ago with your audit committee to go over the audit, and then we met on the 29th of February with the work session with the council to go over the audit, specific more details. So tonight, we're just basically here to overall do a summary and for your presentation so you can approve it. So my name is Mitch Marks. I'm the audit partner at President Gage. This is Dawn Aliverdi. She's the audit manager, and I'll turn the presentation over to Dawn.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having us here tonight.
You bet.
I brought with us the annual report, the comprehensive annual financial report. These are available at City Hall. If you like a copy, they'll also be available. The full financial statements will be available online soon as well. So citizens wish to review those, they are available for the public. President Gage has performed the audit in accordance with the auditing standards, and those standards require us to have an objective opinion and obtain reasonable assurance about the financial statements to make sure that they are materially accurate. The financial statements, like I had mentioned here, are in the packet. President Gage has issued 3 reports on those financial statements. The first report is the opinion indicating that the city's financial statements in regards to the government activity, the business type activities, and component units, each major fund and the aggregate remaining funds are fairly presented in all material respects. And that report is an unmodified opinion, or a clean opinion. It's the best that you can have. The second report that is issued within the financial statements is over internal control procedures, over the reporting. And this opinion is also a clean opinion with no findings noted. We have also issued an opinion on the compliance with state and federal regulations, along with internal controls over compliance requirements regarding major federal funds. And that is also a clean opinion with no findings as well. So as Mitch said, the financial statement was covered in detail in our work session, and also with the audit committee prior to that as well. So with that, we formally request the council's authorization to release the financial statements as presented.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So we need a vote to approve the audit as presented?
Yes.
Okay.
Since this is a public hearing, it would be appropriate also to ask for any
Well, this is a
public comment.
presentation.
It's listed, oh, it's just a presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then we're fine.
Thank you, sir. I'll entertain a motion to approve the audit as presented.
So move. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Councilor Blakey.
I just want to thank you both and your firm for the good work, the precise, accurate meeting, informative meeting. I really appreciate the information where you schooled us up and educated us on Percy and how that's being divided out now among the states, among the cities, what our percentage of it is. I think that was educational for me. It's the first time I'd seen those numbers and seen it that way described. That was excellent. I'm looking forward to 2 or 3 weeks from now when I go to the AIC meeting, our regional AIC meeting up here, and hearing what some of the smaller communities will be commenting about when they're in the process of doing their audits, because obviously those numbers will be much more significant for some of the smaller cities. So, thank you very much for that, schooling me up.
Yeah,
Thank
I would also add that for the first time in a long time, I think we had more discussion about the audit than we've had in the past. Instead of just sitting there, listening and absorbing, there was a lot of give and take, and you guys were great on answering our questions and making us feel good about it. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Council Randall.
and I'm also thankful that we got a clean slate. It's sort of discouraging when you see a lot of these little communities around Idaho and Northwest in general that find out that they've had money embezzled and from their own people that are supposed to be handling their money. So it's real good to see we got a clean slate.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Counselor Maldonado absent.
Thank you.
Thank you, both. Next up is a public hearing. This is zone change ZNC 16-000001, Kinsale Place. And this is a request to rezone lands located immediately east of 908 Bryden Avenue, approximately 1.7 acres, from Bryden Avenue Special Planning Area A zoning district to Bryden Avenue Special Planning Area B zoning district. Mr. Plaskon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. This rezone application was already heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission on January 27th. They considered the staff report. The application, the only public testimony they received was by the applicant, which was obviously in support of approving the proposed rezone. The situation, and maybe it's best if we talk about it while we look at some maps. I'm going to put up an aerial photograph with the zoning layer turned on. North is up on this map. Bryden Avenue runs east-west here. For reference, 9th Street is over here. This is the Tullamore Senior Living Facility here, and the property proposed for rezoning tonight is this property bolded in black on this map. So the situation is that the applicant owns the properties that are bolded in black here, as well as the properties bolded in red. And the problem that the applicant is encountering is the same problem that the same applicant encountered prior to development of the Tullamore facility here, which is that the property is split by the zoning boundary, Bryden Avenue Special Planning Area A here, Bryden Avenue Special Planning Area B here. And the problem is that even though both of those two zones, the Bryden Avenue A and the Bryden Avenue B zones, allow the land use that the developer wants to put on the property, there's a provision in there that says that the building can't be more than 16 feet in height if it's located within 32 feet of the A-B zone boundary, which splits the applicant's property. So that provision for that 16-foot height limit, when it's built within 32 feet of the zone boundary, was written assuming that all the properties were either in one zone or the other. Yet, obviously, when that zone boundary was drawn, it did split properties, and so that creates a problem. The resolution back before Tullamore was built was to rezone the property, so it was all under one zone, so they weren't gonna be subject to that 16-foot height limit. And the same notion is proposed with the rezone application you're being asked to consider tonight. The number of apartment units that the applicant proposes to build for senior living is 36. And that's a very reasonable development density on a property this size. But in order to achieve that, they need a two-story building, and therefore that 16-foot height limit that I mentioned is a factor that prevents them from developing the property the way that they want. Just because it's maybe a little bit easier to see, this next overhead is the same thing, but without the zoning layer turned on. So again, this is Bryden Avenue, 9th Street. Property being asked to rezone is bolded in black. It's got single-family residential to the north of it, immediately south of Bryden Avenue. This is the Tullamore Senior Living Facility, and single-family development to the south on Airway Avenue. I'd like to show you some photographs of the property. Let's see here. I think you have in your packets a concept site development plan that the applicant provided. And if you've looked at that, this view here, which is taken from the south side of Bryden Avenue looking south, is looking down what the westerly driveway is that's proposed for the property development, which is, that development would occur in the back. So the property being asked to rezone is set back quite a ways from Bryden Avenue itself. And this would become a driveway to the senior living housing, senior living facility back there. This is just a picture looking east on Bryden Avenue, so you can see the street built condition. No curb gutter and sidewalk currently on the south side of Bryden Avenue there.
Joe,
Yes.
may I ask a question at this point?
Certainly.
Back to that picture. I'm curious about something here. Looking at the maps and looking at the pictures and all the information, the developer of this property doesn't own doesn't own frontage on Bryden at all. Most of the property's in the back except for 2 access points. That's what it looks like?
They
Or you can't tell?
own this strip of land here going back to the property they want to build on.
So my question being, if, in the future, if they were to acquire those lots in the front, would that then trigger them to have to be responsible for curbs and gutters, sidewalks?
It would depend on what they want to do with those lots that have Bryden Avenue frontage. If they acquired those properties and wanted to redevelop them, as in demolish what's there now and redevelop, then yes, that would trigger the street improvements. If they were to acquire those properties and remodel the existing buildings that are on those properties now beyond 50% of the value,
Right.
the major remodel category,
Right.
that would trigger the street
So
improvements.
because they're basically using infill, the city can't, that doesn't trigger anything to do some work on Bryden at that point. There, even though we're gonna be putting additional cars, homes, people onto the street, because it's infill, we don't trigger anything that helps Bryden at all.
Well, it's not just because it's infill, it's just because their property has such little Bryden Avenue street frontage. And maybe the Public Works Department wants to speak to it themselves, but my understanding is that, that's what it's all about, is the street frontage of the actual property that's being developed. And so, while it is infill, the fact of the matter is, they've only got about 20 or 30 feet of street frontage proper on Bryden Avenue. So this proposal, as far as street improvements, go or not, because in this case it's such little frontage, is the same as a person who wanted to do infill residential development in the orchards through flag lots, where they would want to put in a duplex or a fourplex on flag lots. They're not required to do street improvements there either.
So should that be something that the zoning and city, maybe I'll be talking about in the future or something? It just, or is that just okay and not an issue for, to talk about? Is they're gonna build a little access road, but they're not gonna be responsible for any kind of a curb cut or handicap access for that little section of curb cut that they're putting in and all that?
There's no curb to cut.
There's no curb cut there, right? There's nothing there, so, huh.
Well,
Okay, I'm done.
I'm going to show you just a few more pictures. This is a picture of part of the property. This is on the east end of the property that they want to rezone and develop. You can see it's a vacant field now. This is another picture of another part of the property, just showing the existing condition of it. And one more. This is looking east from the east property line of Tullamore. So this is the westerly part of the property you're being asked to rezone there. And just for perspective, this is a picture of the existing Tullamore Senior Resident Facility, which was built by the same developer and applicant for the rezone that you're being asked to do tonight. So we would expect that development from a rezone of the property tonight would be very similar to what you just saw in that picture there. Let's see here. And since we were talking about it, the proposed use for the property is relatively benign in terms of traffic. And that is an issue that's relevant to the criteria and the standards that you're required to find compliance with in approving a rezone application. So I'm going to kind of tie into that. I have drafted some suggestions for your consideration. If you're favorable to approving the rezone, ultimately you will be asked to approve a reasoned statement of relevant criteria and standards which justify your decision. And so I'll just give you these suggestions in terms of possible justifications for each of the criteria for you to consider.
Joel, were these, I'm assuming P and Z also issued a reasoned statement?
Planning and Zoning Commission on this application did not produce a written reasoned statement for your consideration. My understanding is that, well, we like to try to have them do that for the benefit of the council, who is the final decision maker, for you to be able to adopt what they have proposed for those criteria. In this case, they did not do that. But having been at that hearing and of course written the staff report, what you've got in front of you now are suggestions that if I were in front of them and they were doing it, these are suggestions that I would have given to them as well. So at the conclusion of the hearing, we would ask that the council go through the criteria and standards and have a little bit of discussion about each of them, and maybe you could use this as a starting point for that discussion. The criteria begin at the bottom of page 1 of that document I just passed out. And there are 5 criteria that continue on to the next page.
Okay?
To be clear, Joel, are you asking the council to also approve a reasoned statement tonight?
No, I don't think that's necessary tonight.
Okay.
But it would be helpful for the council to have a discussion about those criteria and give some indication as to what you believe justifications for the criteria are, so that we can come back and bring you a document for your actual approval that's in line with what your stated justifications are.
Okay?
Any other questions?
Yes, Councilor Collins,
Uh,
for pro tem.
Joel, thank you. I just have a quick question, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but the apartments next to it, they're owned by the same individual. Do you happen to know how many units did you mention how many units that one actually
I
has?
did not mention that, and I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. The reason I ask, and this may be for a discussion at some point down the road, is I'm not necessarily sure that I agree with the apartment complex necessarily being benign when it comes to traffic and other things. I'm looking at the apartment next to it, and with our overview there, I'm counting 20-plus cars parked within that complex, and even though our senior residents in Lewiston may not drive as much, that's still a lot of vehicles. And so maybe down the road, it's a discussion point of, there is potentially a need for sidewalks on Bryden in those areas where if we start putting a lot of people in there, and if they're not driving, they are, I'm assuming, walking, for their safety and others as well. And again, that may be a discussion later, but it's definitely something to look at, and I was just kind of piggybacking on what Bob had mentioned earlier as well.
Yeah, if I had to guess, the development that would occur on the property you're being asked to rezone tonight would be a similar number of units to what's there to the west at Tullamore.
Okay.
Very comparable to that same number of units. I don't know for sure. But for reference, as an example, to traffic generation and parking demand from this type of a land use, the zoning code requires half of what it does for non-senior residential apartment complexes. And because it requires only half the parking, as a non-senior resident facility, that's just an indicator that these types of residential facilities require less parking and create less traffic, notably less than if it were for students, for example, or families.
Thank you.
You bet. Councilor Blakey.
Fire access. I'm just curious about fire access here. I can see that there's fire access to the front of the building, but I don't see that there's any clear path for a fire engine to get to the rear of the building. Or am I not seeing something there, or that's just not required? I see, the property's pretty tight up to the property line, the rear property lines, and I don't see fire access, but that's not mandatory that we have to have a clear way to get a fire engine in there?
A couple things on that, if I might respond to that. The applicant has met with staff from all departments and done a pre-application development review. The fire department was present at that. I can't speak directly to the fire department requirements, but I can tell you that they will be required to meet fire department requirements, and the applicant is aware of what those requirements are. The second thing is that although in this case, for this rezone application, the applicant has chosen to offer a concept development plan with the rezone application, the site development plan is not directly relevant to the rezone application. If you look at the criteria and the standards on the form that I passed out and that are adopted into the code, it's more about whether or not the proposed zone is more appropriate than the existing zone, and the resulting use of the property that's expected, that's allowed under the proposed zone, is compatible with that neighborhood and that area. And the site development details are typically more of an administrative function at the building permit level.
Well, I remember when they built the Tullamore, there, and if you look at the, I guess it'd be the second page, and there is a fire lane off of Airway that comes into the back of that facility. I think I remember. Is that correct? Yeah. So, but they have a crash gate back there, is what it is. So I'm sure somewhere down the road that they will address the access to the rear of the facility, not just the front.
It doesn't come across our desk in here.
No. That would be part of the building permit process.
Okay, just ask those questions.
So, yeah, Council Randall.
Got a question for Janet. This paper that Mr. Black gave us, do we need to do a reason statement before we do any kind of zone change?
Yes, before you read the ordinance. After the public hearing is closed, need the council discuss their reasons for approving or denying, and then we'll bring back the written statement for adoption at the next council meeting.
Okay?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just a comment. I understand Mr. Plaskon's position that this is really about a zone change and not about the specifics of the development, because that does come at a later review period. But I am concerned about the issue of saying that frontage is the only determining factor as to whether or not there's impact from a development, and that that's the determining factor in whether or not improvements should be made to any given street. Theoretically, all of the residential properties in front of this parcel could all tear their houses down, build new houses, and they would have to complete all of the frontage improvements on Bryden Avenue. Yet they would contribute far less overall traffic impact on the road than this development would, which appears to have at this point would have virtually no requirements on it because it has this minimum amount of frontage on Bryden Avenue. I think that's definitely something that needs to be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission and looking at our current city code, because I'm sure that was not the intention, is that frontage be the only thing that determines whether or not improvements get made. It should be the impact from the use should be taken into consideration as well.
Well, I would agree with that, Mr. Bennett, but I would also offer that what we've had happen up there, Jay Roach, they built a building right across the street from the Southgate Plaza. That'd be Express Personnel, I believe.
Yeah.
And they were forced into a situation where they had to do the frontage improvement, which is curb gutter sidewalk, and was also informed at the same time, because Jay is a contractor, and I talked to him at length on this, that they may be required to pull that out and move it at some point in time. I'm buying what he said.
Yeah.
And because of the future layout of Bryden, to me, I don't see any sense in sticking a whole lot of frontage improvements on Bryden, because we still don't know where that southern right-of-way is gonna end up when we go through with the widening of the road.
Yeah, that's
mean,
true, and that's
There
one of the
could be
reasons.
some improvements made, but I don't
Right.
see any full-blown reason to create a whole thing when that may be shifted back to the south 4 or 5 feet or even 3 feet. So, to me, that's a non-issue at this point in time, as vis-à-vis the zone change, so. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sort of? Okay, shall we open the public hearing? This time, we'll go ahead and open this public hearing. Anybody who wishes to speak in favor or against the proposed zone change for Kinsale Place, this is the time and place. Name and address for the record, please.
Johanna Frank, 615 3rd Avenue, T2, Lewiston, Idaho. The only concern I think you guys didn't mention was the wheelchair, curbs curbs, if that's a senior citizen place, right now on my way here, there's a fire truck, there was 2 fire trucks, 2 police, something was going on at St. Joseph's Hospital. So that's the only thing is, there was a great big article about the lawyer Eric Peterson and another lady, how they can't go places because they have electric wheelchairs. So this curb thing, I think, is important because there's handicapped people not too far from there. And also there's family care providers, staff, and just remember, today was 2 fire stations and 3 policemen were blocking off of things, so something happened at St. Joseph Hospital, okay?
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, at this time, I guess we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. You have any summary for us, Joel, or would you like us to discuss the relevant criteria?
I don't necessarily have a summary, other than to say that the staff recommendation was for approval of the application. The Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation was for approval of the application. Be happy to answer any more questions if I can, if you have any. Other than that, I believe it would be appropriate for you to deliberate on justifications for a decision on the application in the form of the criteria on the sheet that I handed out.
Okay. Well, I guess, councilors, I'll start off and just with the highlights. The rezone is in general conformance with the comprehensive plan. And I think the property, I will disclose that I've been by the property because I drive by it quite a bit, and, you know, it's not too hard to see it, so disclosure. But it's a pretty good-sized chunk of ground that could be utilized better than what it's being used for now. Granted, it's not going to add a huge chunk to the tax base, since we're talking about ADA and Section 8 housing, but that's something that's sorely needed in this community. And we're going to see more and more of it as the population ages. And I don't see any immutable impacts of incompatible uses or development being located in that same vicinity. If somebody wanted to do it before, they'd have probably already done it. You know, land's been available for a long time. Shall I keep going? You know, I don't see it placing an undue burden on delivery of services. This has all been addressed. Water, sewer, power, you know, solid waste, police, fire are immediately available, and the access is good. I guess once the final design plan comes out, there may be some provision to come in off of Airway through a crash gate or whatever. Or maybe they'll have another access road around to the rear of the property for fire. That'll be up to the fire department and the code and the developers. And the density, as far as I'm concerned, is less than we've seen with some other developments, notably the one that we just had up at 17th and Stewart. So I'm okay with the including this as part of the reason statement. Councilor Miller.
I would agree with the mayor.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Randall.
I'd like to make the motion that we accept all 5 points of the relevant criterion standards as a reason statement for the zone change.
Okay, yes.
I would just suggest, I think with the discussion tonight, we have enough to draft the reason statement so we can actually bring the final one back for motion and approval.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would second that.
Well, we're not gonna,
I don't think we need a motion and a second tonight.
we'll do it at the next meeting. and we'll have a formal reason statement. It's all right. So do we need a vote?
Not tonight.
Okay,
You'll have the reason statement before you at the next meeting, as well as the ordinance for the first reading.
okay. Thank you. Okay. Next up is public hearing ZA 02-16, proposal to amend Lewiston City Code, Chapter 37, Section 37-93.4, paren A, to modify the building height requirements in the Bryden Avenue Special Planning Area A zoning district as related to proximity to the boundary line of Bryden Avenue Special Planning Area B zoning district. Mr. Plaskon.
Thank you, sir. This is a code amendment proposal that is a direct result of the circumstances just described to you and reviewed by you in your last public hearing on the rezone application. Since this is at least the second time formally that there's been a problem presented by this 16-foot height limit for multifamily residential buildings constructed within 32 feet of the Bryden Avenue Area A, Bryden Avenue Area B zone boundary line. Staff decided to draft a proposal for a code amendment that would keep with the intent and the purpose of the two zones, while providing some relief for developers who encountered a situation where their properties were split by the zone boundary. And so the draft code amendment proposal in front of you tonight is intended to do that. It was actually reviewed by the architect of the development proposal that was the subject of your last rezone hearing. And he thought that it would be something that would alleviate the problem. It was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. They had recommended approval of this code amendment proposal. I will say that it's also been reviewed by the City Attorney's Office, which has raised a question that may need additional consideration, and it has to do with Section 37-93.4A3. So if you're looking at the zoning code amendment proposal, it appears as item 3, kind of in the middle of the page, having to do with the building height of 45 feet versus 35 feet. And the City Attorney's Office has suggested that the underlined language that you see there basically go away, and that there be a flat building height limit of 35 feet instead of 45 feet in that section. I think that suggestion deserves consideration. I think I can see some potential confusion, if not maybe some inconsistency with the way that it's written in here now, that the City Attorney's Office suggestion would resolve that, any confusion related to that. You would just have to be aware that if you were to take that suggestion, that you would be reducing the allowable building height for all buildings in the Bryden Avenue A zone from 45 feet to 35 feet in all circumstances. And I can show you an example of some property where this situation might occur. So on this map, Bryden Avenue is running east and west here, so north is up. This is 8th Street. The lighter color that you see on the map is the Bryden Avenue Area A zone. The darker color is the Bryden Avenue Area B zone. Let's just say, for example, this property bolded in black, somebody bought that, wanted to raise the buildings that are on there now and build apartment housing on it. Of course, the way the code is currently written, the building height would be limited to 16 feet if it were located within 32 feet of this zone boundary. With the code amendment that's drafted, that's in your packets tonight, that building height would be allowed to be as tall as 45 feet here, only if it was 15 foot away from this property. So the height increase would go to 45 feet if the building was located a minimum of 15 feet from this property line. If the building were located closer than 15 feet to this property line, then it would be limited to 35 feet in height, which is the same height limit as the B zone itself. So the intent of that was to, if they wanted the increased building height, that they had to set the building back further from the property line to afford protection to the single-family home assumed to be on the adjoining B zone lot. Without that, this A zone here has a 0 side yard setback requirement right now in the code. So the proposal in front of you would require a 15-foot setback if they wanted to go higher than 35 feet, which is the allowable height as the B zone. I don't know if that explains things or makes things more confusing, but that's my attempt to try to explain it.
Is this similar situation what the developer of Southgate Plaza's been experiencing, or?
No,
kind of included that?
because those buildings didn't exceed 35 feet anyway, or even 16 feet for that matter, I don't believe. They were all single-story in terms of the commercial development, that westerly
Like-
building that runs north-south in orientation that crossed the zone boundary line.
Well, I was talking about on the eastern side on
Oh, on
7th
the
Street,
eastern side?
the proposed
It-
multifamily.
And I haven't seen a proposal for that actual development, I've just heard talk about it.
Okay.
But that probably would be a situation that this would apply to as well. But I don't know how tall they were proposing to build those buildings.
Okay.
So, just jumping back to that suggestion by the city attorney's office, I think it would definitely be cleaner and clearer and less confusing to just drop the maximum building height allowance to 35 feet as they suggest.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is, my recommendation to the council at this point would be to adopt the zoning code amendment proposal that was in your packet, except for item 3, the added language that's shown there as underlined go away, and that the 45 feet be changed to 35 feet.
Counselor Blakey.
And the setback for 35 feet again is what, 15, no, how many feet?
In the A zone, there's a 0-foot side yard setback requirement.
In the A zone.
That's the adjacent to Bryden.
Right, that's the zone we're talking
Basically,
about
it's
here.
Bryden to, be Bryden Drive, I believe, on the south, and it would be,
The setback comes into play if it's adjacent to a residential building. If the property next to it has a residential building on it, then the minimum setback requirement is 15 feet. If the property next to it does not have a residential use on it, then it's a 0-foot side yard setback requirement.
So, back to what the mayor was talking about earlier, hypothetical apartment, a residential apartment complex, multifamily that might go in up on Southgate in that corner that we're referring to, that's across from the school district
Mhm.
property.
Mhm.
Let's assuming it was built there. would that property then have a 0 setback on, I forget what street that, I should know.
Seventh.
Seventh?
Seventh and Linden
Seventh
Drive.
back in there, would it be a 0 setback because it's across from the school district and
Yes.
that's not residential?
Well, it's a street side, it's not an interior side yard property line. And
It'd
it's
be a
in the-
0 setback, but would it still be allowable? And again, there's a situation, curbs and gutters and sidewalks would all have to be installed, but there'd be enough room for them to be installed on that street.
Presumably, I don't know if Public Works is looking at requiring additional right-of-way dedication there or not. I haven't heard.
I'm just kind of looking down the
But
road.
we also changed that zone. That's all Bryden
It's all
Avenue
the A
special
zone
plan.
now.
Yeah, it's all A zone now.
Okay,
It's not B.
that's right, okay. Just kind of looking down the road of, if we're going to have to talk about this again.
So you're recommending that we strike the underlined on 3?
Yeah, I had been hemming and hawing about that, and the more I think about it, it would be simpler and cleaner, and it would eliminate confusion if under item 3, you just drop the language that's shown as underlined.
And just leave it at shall not exceed 45 feet.
Well, the suggestion was to reduce that to 35 feet.
Oh, so strike 45 and turn that to 35.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
can I
ma'am.
make a comment?
Yes.
I think if the council were to entertain that idea, it might need to go back, it probably should go back to planning and zoning as a material change to their recommendation.
Okay. So,
You could still have the public hearing tonight,
yeah,
but you could give direction afterwards if you'd like to send it back to planning and zoning,
for clarification on
or for their consideration of the council's
planning area
recommendation.
A, subsection 3, I guess. Okay. Thank you, council.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Bennett?
just in general, Planning and Zoning Commission is the body that's been appointed by the City Council to make these decisions. And they are the ones that are forwarding the recommendation to you. The appropriate time for discussions about whether or not things should be changed is at that meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission. I personally do not feel it's appropriate for staff to be bringing recommendations to the council that go counter to what the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation has been without their first having had an opportunity to review that. Now, it's certainly appropriate, as the city attorney said, for you to send it back to the Planning and Zoning Commission if you have issues that you think that they need to take another look at. But in general, I think that once the Planning and Zoning Commission has made their recommendation, that's the one you work with.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And I agree with you 100%. Having been on P and Z for 4 years and having seen a couple of our recommendations get shot down, it can be frustrating, and I know they put a lot of time and work into it, and they don't get big whopping paychecks like we do. So, I guess with that, I'll go ahead and open this public hearing, see if we have anybody that wants to testify in favor or opposed to ZA 02-16. And seeing none, I guess at this time, I'll go ahead and close this public hearing. Discussion. Yeah, Councilor Randall.
I would like to make a motion that we send this back to planning and zoning, asking them if they would consider dropping the underlined portion of 37-93.4 subpart A, subpart 3, and changing the maximum allowed height from 45 to 35 feet.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. You know, make a little more work, but it'd be better to have a little more clarification, to make sure they were all on the same page. And not to second guess them, but
They want to send it back to us?
to me, you know, 45 feet, button up against a residential neighborhood. We had the same thing, I remember, well, from a P and Z standpoint, it was right over here when they built the dormitories on the other side of the parking lots from where the child care center is and all that. And I know we got into a little bit of a stew over that, the neighbors, sorry that Ms. Schroeder isn't here, because she was one of the vocal opponents, actually wanted to put that building fronting, I think it's 4th Street, it's either 4th or 3rd. But they chose to put the parking in front and move it all the way to the back. So consequently, those people, and it's a sizable building, but the people that live on the west side of that alley, you know, Mr. Sun doesn't show up into their backyard until 11 o'clock in the winter months because of the size of the structure.
That, in fact, you got somebody looking down in your yard.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, I think that would be, in my opinion, appropriate, so. Further comments? Take a vote.
Mr.
on
Mayor?
Send it back? Yes, Counselor.
Could you repeat Counselor Randall's amendment?
You want me to repeat it?
Oh, he was recommending that we send section 37-93.4, subsection A, subsection 3, back to planning and zoning for further reconsideration of changing the maximum building height to 35 feet for clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Okay, further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries, 6-0.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I just forgot to mention too, I think we accidentally switched C and D. So now we need to go back to ZA 1-16.
I think they were the wrong order in the packet. I think they were the wrong order in the
They're correct on the agenda.
Oh, they're not on my agenda, okay.
And they're-
Never mind.
But they weren't correct in my pile because I was looking at the
Right,
wrong
they're
thing.
back.
What-
I know, I was
Okay.
like, where are we
We're
here?
coming in, but we have one more.
Yes, we do.
Got it.
Thank you,
Thank you.
madam. Okay, next up is item D, public hearing, ZA 01-16. This is a proposal to amend Lewiston City Code, Chapter 37 zoning, to modify the allowances for multifamily residential development and land use in the following zoning districts: low-density residential R2, low-density residential R2A, Normal Hill North, which is the NHN area, Normal Hill South, NHS, and medium-density residential R3. These changes would allow an increase in the allowable number of dwelling units per acre in some cases, and a decrease in the allowable number of dwelling units per acre in other cases. Mr. Plaskon.
This is another zoning code amendment proposal that's basically been initiated as a result of having worked with developers of property who are experiencing difficulties in doing multifamily residential developments in different zones, as well as difficulties on the staff end in trying to administer and interpret the rules as they're currently written. The way that multifamily residential development is allowed differs depending on which zoning district you look at. In some zones, they're permitted by right, in other zones, they're permitted by conditional use permit. There are different density allowances, in some case, multiple different density allowances in the same zone. And the allowed number of dwelling units per acre, or the allowed density, is based on different criteria depending on which zone you're looking at. And so that was creating confusion and trouble and wasn't yielding the best results. And it was not very predictable for applicants, and was not deemed at the staff level to achieving any positive result. And the whole point of the density tie to street width or right-of-way width was to try to prohibit too much density on streets that weren't wide enough, to put it very simply. And the way the rules are written, we're not achieving that. And so we just started taking a look at the way the rules were written in the different zones and tried to come up with a code amendment that would simplify things, make things more consistent across the board. And that's hopefully what we've done. We've presented it to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They held their hearing and made a recommendation that the amendment proposal in front of you tonight be approved. I guess that's a summary of what's in front of you on this one.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Plaskon? Councilor Randall?
Joel, has the Historic Commission been consulted on the Normal Hill North zone? Because the proposed historic overlay is in that area. And I was wondering if that might have a bearing on the proposed change on density and stuff like that.
The Historic Preservation Commission has not been consulted on this proposal in front of you tonight. And I think the primary reason for that is this proposal, I don't believe has any bearing on the Heritage Overlay Zone proposal, which is a separate and distinct function and intent. That Heritage Overlay Zone proposal has to do with the appearance of buildings, whereas this proposal has to do with the allowable number of dwelling units per acre on the property. So one has to do with form, if you will, and the other one has maybe more to do with what I would call function.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, Joel. Okay, I guess at this time, we'll go ahead and open this public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak in favor or opposed to the proposed zoning code amendment? Please come forward. Okay, seeing none, go ahead and close the public hearing. How many people attended the P&Z meeting, or do you recall? Developers?
I don't recall there being any. I did invite some to this hearing tonight.
Well, I guess,
Looks like there was one at one of the hearings. Mr. Hasnerl was there.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah, he was there because he was there for something else on the agenda. And I said, hey, this might relate to something you might be working on in the future. You want to speak to it? And he did.
So we're going to take a vote for approval, potentially?
No, this will come later on the agenda as the first reading of ordinance 4656.
Okay, so we just open and close the public hearing. Further discussion, I guess, anything that we can do to help clarify things, but I do take Counselor Randall's comments to heart, because we had a brief chat. I think when this comes forward, that perhaps maybe just having the Historic Preservation Committee weigh in on anything, but I do agree with what Joel was saying also, form versus function. So, I mean, you've got a pretty much landlocked piece of property down there, particularly in the north zone. So if it can be done in a reasonable way of increasing density without adversely impacting the streets, I see Mr. Severance is up there, would have something to say about that. I mean, you can't throw a big old multiplex in down there without a big adverse impact. So I think this can kind of help clarify things so developers have a reasonable expectation of what they can and can't do and be wise. Yes, sir.
Could we ask the senior manager to make sure that the Historic Commission is invited when we consider this ordinance?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, that takes care of that. Move on to the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, or to read the consent agenda.
So moved.
Does anybody wants to pull anything off? Okay, motion been made and seconded. All in favor of reading consent agenda, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, 6-0 to 1.
Approving the City Council minutes of the February 8th regular meeting, February 22nd regular meeting, February 22nd special meeting, February 28th budget roundtable, and the February 29th, 2016 special meeting. Accepting the minutes of the February 18th Audit Committee, the January 12th, 2016 Library Art Committee, January 20th, 2016 Library Board, January 26, 2016 Library Board Strategic Planning Session, and the January 20th, 2016 Parks and Recreation Commission. Approving Resolution 2016-15 by title only, a resolution accepting a public stormwater utility and access easement from Roy A. and Tammy M. Baldus, and approving the vouchers payable dated February 12th, 2016 through February 25th, 2016, in the amount of $1,326,583.57.
Okay, councilors, the consent agenda has been read. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. You still there, Counselor Johnson?
Yes, I said aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the active agenda. First reading of Ordinance 4656. This is amending Chapter 37, Article 3 of the Lewiston City Code to modify the allowances for multifamily residential development and land use in the low-density residential R2 zone, low-density residential R2A zone, Normal Hill North NHN zone, Normal Hill South NHS zone, and medium-density residential R3 zone. I'll entertain a motion to read for the first time Ordinance 4656.
So moved.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Counselor Randall?
I'm thinking that this is the ordinance for the public hearing
Correct.
we just had for D.
Correct.
So I would ask that this be tabled until we can invite the Historic Commission to sit in on the discussion so that they can give their opinion on this.
Should we maybe read for the first time since we have 3 readings and invite them to our next meeting?
Well, yeah, I guess we got 2
On
more
the
readings.
28th?
2 more
Correct.
readings available, so, yeah.
28th
Okay.
and then the 11th of April.
Okay. So you withdraw your motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 5 to 1 to 1.
Approving the first reading of ordinance 4656 by title only. An ordinance of the City of Lewiston amending Chapter 37, Article 3 of the Lewiston City Code to modify the allowances for multifamily residential development and land use in the low-density residential zone, low-density residential R2A zone, Normal Hill North zone, Normal Hill South zone, and medium-density residential R3 zone, and providing an effective date.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Ordinance 4656 been read for the first time. Item B, employment agreement. This is approving the employment agreement between the City of Lewiston and Jana Gomez for her services as city attorney. I'll entertain a motion to approve the employment agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Yes, Councilor Ham.
I think our city attorney has done an exceptional job in the short time she's been here, and I firmly believe we should approve this agreement.
Okay, and this will be by a roll call vote. But since we're in discussion, I'd second Councilor Randall's comments and say, Jana, you have not only been a breath of fresh air, but very astute, and your judgment, guidance, particularly the last couple of months, has been invaluable as far as I'm concerned. I
Thank you.
appreciate the work you've done.
Thank you.
Councilor Blake.
Jenna, we worship at your feet.
Thank you.
Is this
Yes.
reflective of the conversation we had in executive session? That's all included in here.
Yes, the terms we included was basically a 5% increase and changing the contract to be on the fiscal year
Fiscal
basis.
year.
Right, okay.
So the next time it'll renew automatically in October, and then we'll be up again for discussion in September of 2017.
Okay, it just didn't say a percentage, so I wanted to make sure that's what was reflected here.
Yes.
Good.
Just to clarify, council had sort of talked about doing a 4.5% increase with a 0.5% COLA. And when we were trying to word that, I discussed it with payroll and it was a little confusing. So we just did a straight 5% across. So I want you to be aware
Right.
that's how it's drafted.
Right. And I appreciate that, and I did read the email. The numbers don't quite jive if you do 4.5 and a 0.5.
Yeah, it was a little
So,
confusing.
Anyways, I think
So I
we're
want
all
you to
on the
know
same
that's how I
page.
drafted it.
Yeah. We're all okay with that? Okay,
Counselor Blakey?
Aye.
Mayor Kleberg? Oh, Counselor Johnson, sorry.
Counselor Johnson?
Aye.
Mayor Kleberg?
Aye.
Counselor Miller?
Aye.
Counselor Collins?
Aye.
Counselor Randall?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 6-0-1. Okay, and our next item up is potential third reading and adoption of ordinance 4653, amending section 26-17 and 26-19 of the Lewiston City Code to allow the use of scooters at public skate park facilities and to include the use of bicycles in the definition of skate activity. I'll entertain a motion to read for the third time ordinance 4653 by title only, suspending the rules.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0-1.
Approving the third reading of ordinance 4653 by title only, suspending the rules. An ordinance of the City of Lewiston amending sections 26-17 and 26-19 of the Lewiston City Code to allow the use of scooters at public skate park facilities and to include the use of bicycles in the definition of skate activity and providing an effective date.
Okay, councilors, ordinance 4653 has been read for the third time. I'll entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 4653 by roll call vote.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion? I'll just add that we received, I think the council as a whole, I know I've received quite a few emails. I have forwarded them to the city clerk, Carrie, and we'll try and get those as part of the record, people in support of repealing the ordinance. I received 4 of them today, so I don't know who else got them.
I think we all did.
Counselor Collins.
Mr. Mayor, at the last meeting, I voted against adopting this. My vote will have changed this evening. A couple of things that I do want to point out. This has kind of gone through a history of who knows what to get to where we're at with an ordinance that we have that we're not enforcing, and then taking out an ordinance that why aren't we enforcing it, or why are we not letting kids be in the parks? You know, this is something where maybe it was just a bit of a miscommunication initially. Maybe it was a discussion that we should potentially have with our law enforcement as to what are things that are enforceable, or that we should or shouldn't enforce, and this slipped out in the beginning. It was my understanding that the reason it was included was because of where the money came from and the intended use of the park, and the potential cost of having to repair damage caused by scooters, et cetera, that weren't supposed to be there. By accepting this and by changing this and taking this out, I fully hope everybody understands that if and when that park does get damaged, that we all as a whole, meaning the public and the city of Lewiston, are on the foot for repairing it, not just those that caused the damage.
Okay. I had a brief chat with Mr. Marsh before the meeting this evening also, and, you know, we have a fair amount of ownership in this park. I commend the group that was led by Mr. Prazel and Mike Mitchell through their fundraising efforts, and all the kids that went out and pounded on doors and rounded up the funding. But, you know, when all was said and done, to get this project going, we did provide about $26,000 towards the completion of this facility. And after it was all opened and the ribbons were cut and the whole thing, the fact remains that there's still a hole in the fundraising that the city fronted and has not received. So that was a concern of mine. It was a concern of mine before. So when you do get calls from people, you know, yeah, they went over and above their duties for fundraising and stuff like that, but it never did quite come to fruition. Just so we're all on the same page on that one. We do have ownership in this park. We changed our ordinance to allow the use of corporate naming for a public facility called the Mountain Dew Park, over the objections of Councilor Matthew Carlson, who thought we were promoting an unhealthy lifestyle by promoting Mountain Dew when kids are supposed to be out having fun. I'll never forget that discussion. So anyways, you know, the scooters aren't going away. We're not going to enforce it. I mean, I don't see the law enforcement going down there and yarding kids up because they've been riding a scooter, or even writing them tickets. I think we have far better things to spend our money on. So anyways, I'll support it, but knowing that without the support of the group that raised the funds, we wouldn't even have this facility. We wouldn't even be having this discussion. So, other comments?
Counselor Blanky?
Aye.
Counselor Johnson?
Aye.
Mayor Kleberg?
Aye.
Counselor Miller?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Collins?
Aye.
Counselor Randall?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 6-0 to 1. That concludes our active agenda. We'll go on to new business. City councilor comments. Do we have any comments this evening? Well, by golly, I got a few. There's a meeting, fairly important meeting for the community that's going on right now. Why it was scheduled the same night as our meeting, I'm not sure, but the school board is having a meeting over here, I believe, at the Williams Conference Center concerning resolution of the situation with the high school. So hopefully people have attended, or those of us here, if you're interested, I might be running over there myself. We received a letter from the Arbor Day Foundation. Our spot-on city forester, Riley Starks, has got us back up there as a Tree City USA again for receiving our Growth Award. Residents of Lewiston should be proud to live in a community that makes the planting and care of trees a priority. So, signed Dale Lambie, President. That's a big deal. You know, we live in an urban forest right here. Not so much in the orchards, you know. It's a little drier up there, but something that people should be proud of. We virtually have our own arboretum down at the Normal Hills Cemetery. If anybody hasn't had a chance, walk through there. We've got trees from all over the country, state trees from other states that have been planted. They've got little plaques. Kind of an educational experience. So that's that one. And the other one is the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. We received a letter that our jurisdiction's fiscal year 2016 allocations for our community development block grant program, we are in line to receive $185,148. So just so people know that we're still in the pipeline for that, and those are funds that can be used for a variety of things to the betterment of the community, whether it is the providing some of the infrastructure to the new proposed senior housing and ADA housing project up on Bryden, or to SNAP programs for local neighborhoods to allow people to have no-interest loans to improve their painting, roofing, HVAC, whatever. It's a great program, and I'm glad to see we're still receiving funding. So that's all I have for this evening. Mr. Bennett?
Just one item to note that next Monday, the 21st of March, we will have a joint meeting with the Nez Perce County Commissioners. Starting at 4:30, that'll be at the Bramer Building on the main floor. And we'll be talking about a number of issues, including heavy trucks on East Main Street, funding for the airport fire station, the Southway Bridge, Gun Club Road, and Nez Perce Terrace, that intersection as a part of the road extension project up there, and talking about joint or regional dispatch options.
Okay. I actually have one more that I almost forgot, but Council Randall and I attended a meeting with the engineering firm and the Joint Airport Authority concerning the potential relocation of the fire station up at the, by the airport for the ARF station. And happy to report that the price has come down. I still think it needs to come down further, but they have made some inroads in on the price, and the discussion is ongoing, so. Advisory Board and Commission appointments. Do we have any this evening? Okay. Work session agenda topics. Anybody want to add anything? We're kind of open for April, aren't we? Or
We have 4 items right now for the
Okay.
April 4th work session.
okay, well, if anybody comes up with anything between now and then, we'll get them on there. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody, for participating and watching on TV. $6 million for a park.